Caterpillar. Texas company. $200 a share. 477 million shares, making it a $108 billion company. We have gotten pretty far down in the market cap list, although Caterpillar has had a rough, looks like, pretty rough period here as a cyclical stock, dropping quite a bit from when we ran this screen. It was 400, now it's 300, so I think I put the wrong price in. Okay, there we go. 155 billion market cap. I don't know why we saw a different price here, but $325. Okay, so 155 billion market cap. Sailor, yeah, having a hard time. The average price that he has in Bitcoin is he's almost in the red. A couple of down days and he'd be in the red, which would be funny to me. All right, so construction equipment. We've got asphalt pavers, backhoe loaders, cold planers, don't know what that is, compactors, compact track loaders, forestry machines, forestry machines, material handlers, motor graders, pipe layers, road reclaimers, skid steer loaders, telehandlers, track type loaders, track excavators, wheel excavators, and wheel loaders. I don't know what these things are. Only one I know is bulldozer, which that's construction. Then they've got a whole bunch for the resources industry. Electric rope shovels, drag lines, hydraulic shovels, rotary drills, hard rock vehicles, large track type tractors, large mining trucks, large wheel loaders, off-highway trucks, wide body trucks, articulated trucks, wheel tractors, scrapers, wheel dozers, fleet management, I'm guessing that's software, landfill compactors, soil compactors, machinery components, autonomous ready vehicles and solutions, select work tools, and safety services and mining solutions. Okay, that's kind of the gist. Looking at Caterpillar stock. S&P down 130 basis points, worsening here a little bit. Corcept reaching kind of highs of the day. Rough day for Biopharma too. Capricorn down below 10 now. Palantir below 80 if you wanted that on your shopping list. Palantir Caterpillar deal. I'd like that. CEO of Caterpillar is named D. James Umpleby III. What a name. Okay, so I see the revenue here breakdown is, looks like half of the company, a little less than half is construction, a little less than half is energy and transportation, and the rest, 20% or so, is resource industries. So mining. I guess in energy and transportation, there's oil and gas, power generation, industrial. They have even further breakdowns. Resources. SPY down 140 bips now. I don't understand what that means. How much of your short portfolio should you typically hold in cash? Oh. Morning. Is that Big Vlad? Hey. Okay, so last 3 years for Caterpillar. Definitely some growth there. But, it's kind of like the definition of a cyclical company. It is like the most cyclical company. So Caterpillar revenue and earnings in a recession maybe would suffer. But keep in mind that doesn't mean the stock would suffer. If that's priced in, that's priced in. Quantum had a bigger bloodbath before the open. No, they're pretty globally diversified, but let's get to the numbers and see. So what kind of margins do these guys have on these gigantic machines? This is, again, more of a smokestack company where you want to analyze PP&E and things like that. Pretty much all the biopharma stocks are down on the Peter Marks news that he's been sort of fired by RFK. A lot of senior leadership apparently at FDA has left in protest, but I don't know if I fully believe that. That's the rumor. So will any drugs get approved? Will any medicine make it to FDA approval. And I don't think RFK is going to block cancer drugs and things like that. And I also think that drug CEOs have access to the Trump administration, and stopping FDA approvals would be very, very bizarre. I'm a big fan of the FDA over here, so there's not too many non-opioid painkillers being developed. So I don't know how that makes a difference. Yeah, I think it's I think everybody knew the day was coming when there'd be, I don't know why you'd call it revenge, but I guess revenge against the bureaucrats, who I think are just trying to do their best, and they're not even bureaucrats. But I will say, take a look at the HUMA medical review, where the medical reviewer for the FDA has said, we don't want HUMA FDA approved, and the FDA approved it anyway, most likely due to some strange, dynamic. So pharma down across the board. Capricorn down 17%. Palantir down 7%. SPY down 150 bips now. Things are worsening quickly. Some of our favorites like ADMA down 10%. Vaxcyte down 54% on some bad news there. Some stocks not reacting. Anavex, SLS. Jazz is flat, but plenty of other stocks down a ton. Biohaven, interesting. CRSP basically can't stop going down. It's CRISPR Therapeutics. Never liked CRISPR Therapeutics myself. Rocket down 15%. My old company, Travere, down 11%. Chimera down. Sarepta down. BioNTech, of course, down with Moderna. I think only a couple of pharma stocks up. Bristol Myers, J&J, and Amgen. The companies that have drugs for sale don't have a problem here. But I'm sure they want FDA to work too. So yeah, I think, we've been bearish on this channel, as you guys know. Doesn't mean there aren't going to be stocks that go up. Doesn't mean that there aren't going to be stocks that outperform the stocks that go down. But it's a rough time right now. It's we've had a debt fueled expansion for a long time, and we can do the irresponsible thing and kick the can down the road and fuel more debt, and just keep selling more paper, which we are doing anyway. But somebody has to take a hard look at what we're doing with government. I think we'll be bullish when stocks are cheap. I think you can't have no growth stocks trading at 40 times sales, 40 times earnings. That's high yield prices. That doesn't make sense. If you can buy a bond for the same price, why wouldn't be senior in the cap table? Why wouldn't you? So yeah, I think the surprise the surprise FDA situation. I think there was an expectation that RFK would serve as sort of just a figurehead, and by him getting involved deeply into matters directly, I think there's some concern there that I think that's the hope, that was that he'd be just a figurehead, just whining and dining, hanging out around DC and just sitting out his 4 years, just doing nothing. But if he's going to actively be guiding policy, I think that's pretty dangerous. So we got a lot of things happening, right? You have tech under siege via overinvestment and high valuations. You have biopharma under siege. It's not a small part of the S&P through potential regulatory actions or inaction. You've got sort of global industrial and manufacturing sector potentially under siege through tariffs. And you've got sort of deleveraging or, sort of fiscal spending unwind in addition to deleveraging kind of happening. So both fiscal and monetary kind of working against you. So yeah, a lot of reasons to be bearish. But we'll see. All right, so about 160 billion enterprise value. I'm not including the financial products debt. Looking at cash flows. About 10 billion in free cash flow last year. Again, 160 billion enterprise value, so 16 times free cash flow. Now the problem is, if that's a cyclical peak, that's kind of expensive. But it's one of the few mega caps we looked at that at 150 billion, it's actually not even a mega cap, just a large cap maybe. Possibly at reasonably valued, but hard to expect cyclical machinery growth in this kind of environment. Would think that we're at a peak there. Market recovering a little bit. S&P only down 115 bips now. Corcept also still retaining a high price at 97. What else is going on? Yeah, some recovery in our quantum shorts. D-Wave barely down at this point, but have no fear. That'll continue to drop, I'm sure. Crazy QUBT, is just a menagerie of shorting. Kind of shorts all bumping into each other on the way down. Or on the way up, too. Yeah, there's just a lot of shorts in QUBT. It's basically a worthless company. But remember, who is allowed to short sell? Who has the money to short sell? It's largely hedge funds. And hedge funds have gotten to a position where hedge funds can barely take any risk. And at the pods that control a lot of the equity market, those pods may have been short QUBT, and they're basically being asked to delever. So you might have a lot of short covering in QUBT and other stocks like it, because there's just a lot of folks that are short and they can't hang in due to different dynamics. I mean, maybe sometimes the rest of their portfolio, it could be the firm is having a rough year. So crowded shorts are going to kind of outperform because the crowded shorts will have to sort of, get rebalanced. And you don't want to be a crowded short in general, usually. But sometimes they're good shorts. So you just sort of have to ride it out. But I think that's what's kind of going on in a few stocks, more than a few stocks, actually. Okay, so it does look like the cyclical peak earnings. So when companies that have business cycles, which is sort of a old school term, some of you guys have never even seen a business cycle, which is hilarious. We used to say that in 2000. In 2000, we used to say, "Oh, you kids have never seen a bear market," and oftentimes it was true. And so, a company like Caterpillar is called cyclical. What does that mean? It's pretty simple. Their earnings kind of look like this. And what's interesting is break even can be here, which means that they actually lose money in some years. But overall, hopefully they have positive net earnings. So what you try to do is you average an entire cycle. You say, okay, what's the PE of this? What's the PE of this? And because you can sort of say, well, that you could say is it sort of equivalent. This is still the break even. You could sort of reframe that as just the area under the curve if you normalized it for those two. So, maybe another way to look at it could be, let's say this is again this break even. You might have something like this, or hopefully you start to have higher cyclical peak earnings and maybe even have a situation where you don't lose money as your company grows. So that's sort of one way to do it. No, I think trailing 12 months isn't necessarily good for cyclical. You want to sometimes even do 5-year earnings or more, because you want to capture both parts of the cycle, the high earnings part and the low earnings part. So Caterpillar is extremely cyclical. Sarepta is sort of still under siege from some of the issues facing their drug. And you also have an issue with Sarepta because if the FDA is undergoing a large amount of change, well, their drugs technically did not meet the burden for some FDA approvals. So they got approved, of course, we know that. But, they were sort of granted a bit of a special approvals because of the very serious fatal disease, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So possibly one of these things where does RFK take a second look and say, wait a second, we should have not approved this. Let's unapprove it. I don't know. I doubt it. I don't know who would want to deprive these kids of a medicine that could help them theoretically. Nevertheless, we're in uncharted territory, so I think the market does not like uncertainty, regardless. So you could do, like I said, something called a cyclically adjusted PE ratio, or CAPE, which is surprisingly close to COPE. but it's Cape. What else did I want to tell you about cyclicals? Yeah, if you haven't seen a bear market in a long time, or a downturn, economic downturn in a long time, it's kind of hard to understand this, but you could have negative earnings for several years. So I'm trying to go back and see what the cash flow situation was for these guys, going backwards a bit. Yeah, you can see here that at some point, 2020 might have been maybe a cyclical low. You can see that Caterpillar had very, very low net earnings and lower cash flow to still had around 5 billion. So if you do the PE on the cyclical low, it's 30 times earnings. If you do it on the cyclical peak, it's 16 times earnings, which is why I was saying I'm not sure it's cheap. It's still around 20-ish times earnings, and the cyclical growth, you sort of have to look at it cycle over cycle, which, is very, we're very used to looking at earnings and revenue growth year over year. S&P recovering, only down 90 basis points now. Of course, up flirting with 100. And here was like I said, a cyclically good year was 2019. Okay, wasn't that great. Revenue was up a lot, but earnings didn't follow. So only 6 billion free cash flow that year. So kind of looking like Caterpillar's last year or two of performance was a bit of an aberration. Just discussed Sarepta a second ago. It's a rough day for many drug companies as the FDA leadership is being shaken up a bit. Ah, interesting. But they actually do keep the free cash flow. So usually with the interest rates, you get a mix of higher costs as well as higher earnings. But it does appear to correlate fairly well with interest rates. But yeah, it was free cash flow was 5 billion to 6 billion for a while, and then shot up to 10 and 11 billion. But historically, they've also had higher sales too, to be fair. So I think that might
explain it maybe even a little better. So they've had both. We all have the I mites. Okay, so we're going all the way back to 2017 now. Yeah, so 4 billion, 5 billion, 6 billion, 5 billion, 6 billion, 6 billion, and then shoots up to 11 and 10 billion. So a little bit odd. Cord is Corcept, which is the drug company. You can also just use DES on Godel to determine what a company is. Very, very easy. I made it so easy, it's only like 3 or 4 keyboard presses. There's a rival service called Google, which also provides information. Well, peak to trough, INQ is down about 60%, so I don't know if you've made more money shorting other things. God bless you if you have. Why don't you list earnings? What are you talking about? Why don't I list earnings of what? Yeah, I'm just saying the peak to trough drop is large. The peak to trough drop from the market's not that big. I haven't looked at Corcept in a while. Okay. Yeah, we're going back now almost 10 years for Caterpillar. Again, with these cyclical stocks, you have to go back quite a ways away to really understand them. S&P down 80 basis points, well off the lows. Okay, let's see here. Going back to 2015, almost 10 years ago for Caterpillar. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily feel like a good short if you've been shorted like I have, which is, kind of a roller coaster. And there you have it. Those stocks are up now. Remember, you do have the DARPA tender results coming out this week or next week. Some of the companies already know if they've been selected, I think. Pain and punishment in this trade. But we had a lot of pain and punishment with Sava too. I don't think they're going to get it, but we don't know. I would expect them to insider trade it if they do. And we'll see if how the first companies react. We might want to do, one thing we could do on Godel is do NI DARPA. And we can just have a screen for DARPA news here that's real time. So this will alert us pretty much right away if there's a DARPA award. And remember, their goal is to award a lot of companies the first round and then sort of truncate that to just a few companies next. Yeah, D-Wave is definitely not getting it because they're not a quantum company. Well, for Viking, Amgen is already in GLPs, and they kind of have a superior GLP. Glaxo is kind of one of the only ones without a dance partner. But I don't know if Glaxo is going to be that relevant. There's lots of GLPs available and only so many people who want them. Yeah, the DARPA awards are not that big to start with. I think the final contract awards might be a little bit bigger. So we'll see if those DARPA awards are announced. Again, you could sort of have this set up on your screen so you'll be the first to know. I think what would be cool is if one of the private companies gets the award, then you might know that one of the public companies isn't getting it. GLP isn't too crowded. There's only two or three drugs approved. So for PD1, you have like 10 PD1s approved. So I don't think you're crowded at two companies, but yeah, stuffy knows forever. All right, so Caterpillar, we're at the 2014 10K. Let's go back a little bit more. I'm not sure how many folks they're going to do evaluation. They're kind of doing evaluation awards, and then they're going to take those and go to kind of a more formal bit of a more formal tender or bigger award.
This might be one of the rare 10Ks where the financials are actually in a separate document. This is an old school one. Yeah, and this is a bit annoying because we actually have to find the other exhibit. Twenty 10K. Let's see. This is like a little disorienting. Okay, it's 2018. Okay. I have 2015, and I think I have 2014. It's light mode. I just figured it out. That's why it's disorienting. Okay. So cash flow. Ah, look how interesting. We had to go back 12 years, but they did have this cyclical peak, and here's the cyclical trough, and you can actually graph this. Let's chart this. It's kind of funny. You can see the cycle. It took them 11 years to have more cash flow than they had in 2013. So it kind of tells you a little bit how these cyclical companies go. And as somebody astutely mentioned, that's why we have a very smart audience. You sort of have a double cycle. You have the financing cycle, and then you have the economic cycle. So they're both cyclical. So you might get like a double cyclical bottom. And in some cases, you might have the cycles kind of offset each other. In some cases, you might have the cycles reinforce each other. Again, here you have the old style, which is you used to pull out the financials out of the 10K and put them in this weird section, which is like the exhibits to the 10K. And that was like the bane of a lot of people's existence, a lot of financial analysts' existence to do that. But that's how it used to get done way back when, in the ancient times of 2010. Not that long ago. But if you're old school, you gotta
if you want to be serious about finance, you got to know how they used to do things and how they do things now. You got to know everything. There's nothing that you can not learn. You got to learn every company that was in your industry, that used to be in your industry, all the history, because you're gonna talk to these old heads. That's a technical term. I learned it in prison. The old head is just an old person, basically. They're the wise older person. When you talk to the old heads, you gotta be able to talk to them about the companies that existed in their time, because they're using those companies to guide them to understand the current world. And you don't have that benefit because you weren't there. In some cases, you weren't even born yet. So you got to go study the old. My brother and I have an old joke between us, inside joke. We say you have to study the tapes. Comes from wrestling, but you really do have to go study the tape, the old tape. Read old 10Qs and 10Ks. That's why I actually spent a good chunk of my weekend processing this data set of old dead companies, dead stocks that have been removed. They were removed a long time ago from the S&P 500. I'm sorry, removed a long time ago from all data sets. These were just old stocks that went delisted and defunct, and almost no system has them, including Bloomberg. And so we're loading those into Godel because it's important. If you're going to study bubbles, for example, quantum stocks are in a bubble. You want to see, well, how long did other bubbles last? And to do that, the first stock I thought of was some of these old internet stocks. But to my chagrin, I couldn't find them on my system, which makes sense because we're just started Godel. But I took a peek at some of our rival systems. I couldn't find them there either. They're not on Yahoo Finance. They're not on TradingView. They're not even on Bloomberg. So I was upset by this because I want to go see what that looks like. If I remember it correctly, how did some of these old stocks trade way back when? And so I found the data sets, and we're going to be putting them back. And then the same thing applies in news. A lot of these news sources go back 10 years or 5 years, and we want to be able to go back 20 or 30 years. Anyway, here's the chart of Caterpillar's free cash flow, and this is going back to 2010. So you had this very erratic cycle here, and this kind of bigger cycle. So do we go back down to 7 billion or 5 billion in earnings? If we do, that could mean, the stock's trading at 30 times. And with cyclical stocks, you just don't know. You just never know. And this is why semiconductors are, you might say, what does Caterpillar have to do with semiconductors? A lot. Shockingly, a lot. Semiconductors you can think of as cyclical machinery for microelectronics. When you need 10 tractors and you've only got 5, you order 5 tractors. And if you're sitting at Caterpillar, you just got 5 orders from 80 different places or 100 different places. Okay, great. You sell the tractors. And then you call the same customer a year later and you say, hey, do you guys want more tractors? He says, sure, this year we need 8. Fantastic. And you sell them 8. And you give them a call next year and you say, how many tractors do you want this year? 10? He said, John, it's been a bad year. You saw the tariffs, you saw the unemployment. I said, okay, so do you want 8? I said, John, I'm not ordering any. And John, the salesman at Caterpillar, says, what? But the guys, the factory, we made assuming you would order 10 or 12 or something. You're telling me you're not going to order any? He said, yeah, business isn't, we don't think business is going to be that good. So John's sitting there like, oh my God. And then he calls the sales guy next to him and said, John, Mike, I think I'm going to get fired. I said, John, why? I'm not going to make my sales quota. Mike laughs and he says, I'm not making my sales quota either. And they wait, and the next year comes around. He says, any chance you're going to order any tractors this year? The guy says, no, the economy's still pretty rotten.
And then a year passes and he says, how about this year? And he says, I'll order 2. And that's a cycle. That's how it happens. And the same exact thing happens in semiconductors. So NVIDIA, though, is a unique company. It's not like the rest of the semiconductors where there really are substitute goods for something Microchip makes, Texas Instruments might make, and Analog Devices might make. Nobody makes an H100 or a B100, right? Just one company. And they pick their price. And demand is very good. And demand is not related to the economy, right? The ChatGPT servers are overheating, according to Sam Altman. They're melting. Of course, this is just hyperbole. But, we don't know. And that's the point, is that when John is hearing those orders and he's got 0 2 years in a row, John doesn't know if they're ever coming back. Maybe we don't need tractors anymore. And the same thing applies in semiconductors, where you're at the bottom of the cycle, you're saying, I don't know, maybe this is the new normal. Maybe we're never going to see a boom again. And you get really scared, and you get really worried. And the same thing happens at the top of the cycle, where you say, this is the new normal. We're never going to see a downturn. You don't understand. This is a whole new application. It's just impossible that we see a downturn. And inevitably there's a downturn. But even I'm, old grizzled veteran at 42, even I'm a little bit used to this outperformance where, I do think this is a new normal. I do think we have a super cycle led by AI. But, I don't know. I have no clue. I could see it go both ways. I mean, the AI applications are really great. But we can do a lot with AI with what we have now. And I'm not sure the marginal improvements are going to be necessarily worth. I mean, you got people talking about replacing all knowledge workers in the next 5 to 10 years. That's pretty amazing if it's even remotely possible. Even 5 or 10% of it is possible. That's a big deal. So So, if we replace a lot of knowledge work, it's pretty good for the economy. You're going to have those workers contribute to the economy somewhere else. I mean, it may be a little bit of a sloppy transition, but it'll happen. But, the question is, in this AI boom, will that counteract the cyclical downturn to the point where there is no cyclical downturn? And it's just a secular, which is the opposite of cyclical. It's a secular bull market in these chips. And that's sort of what's happened with NVIDIA. But if you remember a little while back, they had a 6 month to a year period where revenue was down, surprisingly, and the stock was down. This is before the H100 boom that really changed everything. So as one of you guys in the chat, again, we have a very, very intelligent chat, is remarking, it's difficult to invest with confidence. When I say invest, I don't mean you and me trading. I mean the CEO of Microsoft, the CEO of Facebook, or Meta. Those are capital investments. It's difficult for them to say, you know what, I'm ready to make an uncancelable order for $5 billion of chips. Because what happens if I buy those $5 billion of chips and they sit there? If I hire $5 billion of people, I can fire them, right? If I want $5 billion of cloud capacity, oftentimes I can cancel it. I can't really do that with chips. I buy them, they show up in our warehouse, and they might just sit there. I don't glaze everyone. As you guys know, I like to ban you guys. I'll ban my followers. I don't care. I enjoy it. We make a whole game out of it. Yeah, NVIDIA has sort of crafted their capacity and their performance in a way that has created really great demand. Having said that, they've probably created a lot more demand than they may have even wanted. Because when you have that much demand, you really are setting yourself up for a disappointment. So, I don't know. We'll see. Oh, no problem. Guys asking for bans. That's easy. It's one click. Someone beat me to one of them. Okay, no problem. Stop crashing out. All right, S&P down 79 basis points. Corcept up over $101 now. NVIDIA is still struggling. Yeah, I don't know. Alex is making a good point. I mean, I don't think unemployment will go to 15%, but I do think, there's going to be some tumult. There's a bit of Jevons paradox. I mean, I think knowledge workers will be armed with tools to, supercharge their business. So I don't think we're going to have things get that bad. And things like physicians and whatnot, those will be very hard to replace. It'll take a lot of time to replace doctors and lawyers and other chunks of the market. But I already would imagine some legal work is being replaced by AI, and that's definitely going to put some pressure on the system. Market going up a bit. You could just do NI Trump if you want. I see some headlines scrolling on Godel here. Sometimes hard to keep up. Trump says serving in 2028 would be a fourth term. Okay. Trump crashing out a little bit himself. I don't know if you could replace an HR department with Trump. I'm sorry, with AI. Got Trump on the brain. Trump says Zelensky's trying to back out of the rare earth minerals deal with the U.S. That's from the People's Daily Online in China. We get Chinese news? Trump doesn't rule out running for third term. There's a lot of people that want me to do it. The Trump tape is very significant. Trump calls the coverage of the Signal leak old and boring. I love it. More Trump tariff worries. Trump reportedly pushes his team to be more aggressive with tariffs. Trump threatens bombings of Iran. Man, this man is a problem. Or maybe he's a solution. The UK will face Trump tariffs this week as the president sparks global recession fears. Dang. Next, we're going to be doing tariffs. We're going to be doing tariffs on short sellers. That's right. Take your profits. If you take your profits, you're going to have to pay me.
China. 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 China.
Can't tariff quantum. When we can, we will. Every qubit you gotta pay.
Wrong. 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 It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. Dirty, rotten traitor.
Traitor?
Dirty, rotten traitor. You are fake news. I'm gonna come. China. We're not doing well. Let me call the Russians to help. I am the chosen one. Wrong. 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 I'm really rich. I'm really rich. Quiet. Quiet. I did everything right and they indicted me. I'm gonna come.
Download all these for future playback.
Wrong. Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank you. Congratulations.
Are you gay? Are you gay?
Bing, bong, bong, bing, bing, bing. Dirty, rotten traitor. Look at this guy.
I'm an extremely stable genius. Okay.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling. Shut up, silly woman. Thank you very much. I don't give a damn. The wall just got 10 feet taller.
It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen.
Oh, look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So we have.
Wrong.
I'm gonna come.
You are fake news.
Obama. China.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come. Wrong. I'm really rich.
Because you'd be in jail.
Thank you very much.
Grab him by the pussy.
That China has total respect for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump's very, very large brain.
He died like a dog.
You failed!
All right, S&P down 87 bips now. It's all computer, yeah. That would be critical. Or everything is computer. Is that the... Al Baghdadi. Is there anything to watch on D-Wave?
Yeah, I've already registered for the quantum conference. I don't think they'll be saying anything on there. Would have been nice to go to the Phoenician. Get the keynote address. I'm just looking at the agenda, it's like really bad. All right, still want to go through a few more Caterpillar 10Ks. Wonder what the 2008 era looked like for these guys. Okay, so 2009 was their trough year. Looked pretty bad. Almost break even, basically. Cash flow is still positive. So here's the last 19 years of free cash flow for Caterpillar. You could see sort of two cyclical, maybe 3 cyclical peaks, assuming this is the cyclical peak. It looks a little expensive to me.